Hello friends and welcome to my YouTube channel. Welcome to Setup Our Dives, guys. In today's video, I'll be reacting to an interview that Tucker Carlson had with Vivek Ramaswamy. I'm hoping I'm saying his name correctly. He is one of the Iowa presidential candidates from the Republican Party, and I was watching the interview yesterday and I just had so many thoughts to say. I'm kind of at the point, where I'm like pretty much ready to have Biden out of the office because I don't know, I think the whole nation has the Biden fatigue. In fact, I want to say that I work with people with different views than with different political views than myself. And whenever we get into a discussion, there's one point of agreement, which is, that Biden is deeply incompetent to be the president of our nation. And honestly, I think this will be one of the most deciding elections of our country's history in which direction we're going to go, because there is a lot that is at stake. And I think that it's clear that Biden is incompetent and that he doesn't know what he's doing. I also think to myself how weak we look on the international scale. I think to myself, there's Putin and the Chinese president just sipping tea and watching how pathetic we look. When you think about a president of a nation in general, you want somebody who is probably the smartest American, the most eloquent American, is the best what we have. And when we have Biden being that, when you think about this, an average American is more cognitively intact than the president of our nation. Just let that sink in, okay? Because that is scary. That is so scary. I feel we've never looked so weak. We've never looked so incompetent as a nation. And honestly, I just can't wait to vote. In fact, what it's been so deeply disturbing about the Biden administration that they've not been advocating for any kind of American values. What are the American values? The American values are values that focuses on the family, the nuclear family as being, the unit of society, the subunit of society that holds the society together, that is the best unit for children. All I feel like the Biden administration been doing is been catering to these groups like LGBTQ groups, And so I'm just like done. I'm just totally done, and I just can't wait to have somebody in the office with at least common sense. Is that too much to ask? You tell me. Anyhow, guys, so I was watching this interview and I thought, that Vivek Ramaswamy had really good points. So I'm just going to be reacting to this interview and sort of giving my commentary on this matter. So let's dive in.
Is that on? I love it. So Vivek is the only person I think who hasn't practiced politics for a living. Correct.
Yeah, I'm not a practitioner.
No, you're not. You're not a practitioner. So it's interesting. So let me just start with a very quick overview. You've been traveling around the country for the past, 3 months, 4 months?
Yeah, 4 months.
How do you think the country's doing?
I think the country is doing poorly, is the answer. I think that we have a void in our country. I'm the first millennial ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. And I see people my age in particular across this country who are not doing well because we're starved for purpose and meaning. The people are looking to be part of something bigger than ourselves, and yet we've lost the things that used to ground us. Faith, patriotism, hard work, family. These things are gone, and so we're lost in the wilderness. And then we latch on to whatever the other side serves up for us. We could wokeism, transgenderism, climatism, whatever it is. These are symptoms, drug addiction, depression, suicide, you name it. These are symptoms of a deeper void of purpose and meaning in our country. But Tucker, I think the good news in that is I think our country's not doing well, but I think that this is also our opportunity as a movement to level up and fill that void, that vacuum, with our own vision. Individual, family, nation, God. When I talk to young people about this, they're more interested in that than they are in race, gender, sexuality, and climate. And so now we got to start running to something as Americans, and if we do, I'm confident that our country will be doing well again. That's where I'm at.
Is it my imagination, or are people who weren't raised in traditional religious households, who haven't spent a lot of time thinking about theology, all of a sudden talking about God a lot? Do you notice that?
I do notice that, actually, and I think this is a good sign because There's an old expression, right? If there's a hole the size of God in your heart and God does not fill it, something else will instead.
Good point. Good point. I obviously don't know if Vivek Ramaswamy is a Christian or not. I don't think he's a Christian. I think he's a Hindu. But what he's saying is legit. What he's saying is true. I think for the past 2 years, I've been having more conversations with people about God, about how things are not right, how America is wasting its time on issues that are of literal importance, really, and truly neglecting the real issues that truly keep a society healthy: family values, hard work, things that truly are American in their nature. So I truly believe that everyone is just sick. When I say sick, truly sick of people like Dylan Mulvaney and all this transgenderism that is just totally dominating the conversation. Like, those people and those movements have gotten so much attention that, just average hardworking Americans who are family oriented have lost their voice. Like, how is it that these people who are truly actually a minority in society, are running the conversation? And, I feel like the whole thing that the Biden administration has been doing is just literally catering to those groups. And we're tired of it. All I want is a society that focuses on family, focuses on individual effort and rewarding hard work. Those are truly American values. And honestly, I do agree with him that, we're at this point where we have this spiritual void. And if we deny God, when we deny God as the foundation of our nation, what happens is that we'll try to fill that void with these radical and almost overblown issues of transgenderism or climate. Not that these things like climate change are not important, but they're dominating. There's certain values that are far more important that are being ignored more than ever. Even though things are incredibly crazy, people realize, what happens to a society, to a nation, when it neglects God, when it pushes God aside. What is it that holds us together? What is the central vision? And I think like never before, this is a great opportunity for us as Christians who preach the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ to evangelize, to talk about God. It's like, oh, we need God because our society is going crazy, and everything's going haywire. No, we need God because He is the glory of everything. He is the maker of everything. And truly what all of us need as individuals in this nation is a personal relationship with God that will give us wisdom, that will give us stability, that will ground us in things that are truly healthy for our human flourishing, and I truly believe that relationship is found in Jesus Christ. Obviously, as a Christian, we live in America, where there is a separation of church and state. I do believe that there should be freedom for everyone to practice, whatever they want to practice. Although I have to say that I hope that this is an opportunity for us as Christians to, preach the good news of the gospel, how God can truly transform not only a society, but also our individual lives.
That's what's happened in the last decade in our country. Something else, some secular religion has filled that void. But it hasn't really satisfied our moral hunger, right? And so that effect is fading, and I think people are hungry to turn back to the real thing. The conversation's coming up, but they say it with a kind of prudishness.
Yes.
Right? God is a four-letter word. It's sort of a thing you have to tiptoe around. And I think that right now, family's the same way. The nuclear family makes some people uncomfortable when I say it, but actually this is the best known form of governance to mankind. And so if we start talking more about, hey, that's what we're running to. That's actually what we stand for. Yes, we are one nation. I'm a citizen of this nation, not some nebulous global citizen somewhere else, that it is one nation under God. Yes, it is a nation that is stronger when we ground ourselves in the unit of the family. Then I notice something happens, especially for younger people across the country, Tucker, is they're more open to that message than they thought, but they need someone to serve it up to them. And I think I'm the first non-politician, but I'm also a younger person in this race. I don't have a ton of experience running governments before. But I think in reaching younger people, that's something I feel called to do in this race. And it's why we're traveling college campuses across this country. and I am optimistic about what I see.
Well, since you are a younger person and spend time with them, we saw yesterday that a group of...
I think the young people in our nation are so hungry for some kind of truth, all of this political propaganda, all of this transgenderism, all of these sexual, LGBTQ nonsense, that's been so pervasive, so perverted, and it's been just dominating the discussion, our social media sites, all of these things. People are tired because none of those things are grounded in true reality, in true human flourishing. None of those things are truly leaving people satisfied. If anything, it's leaving people more in mental health, in depression, in anxiety. Like, it's just dominating and the reason is that because people have parted themselves from reality. You can take all kinds of hormones, all kinds of surgeries, that's not going to fix your issue, and there are people who know that truth, but they cater to that delusion and confuse people, and people are just hungry for truth, for substance, for reality. And I agree with him. This is the time for us to have these discussions.
A reservist has been called up to Europe, apparently, to prepare for war with Russia. Of people in the age cohort who might plausibly be called up to do that, what's the response?
I think there is no basis for us to send our young men and women, our sons and daughters, people my age or any age, to go defend somebody else's border halfway around the world when we should be using our own military to secure our own border in this country. And I will not apologize for that. We have to put the interests of this country first. And one of the things that does frustrate me, Tucker, is that this is one issue where I so love many of the other people who are running for this nomination for president. I think most of us, and the entire field I speak for, are in this for the right reasons. We are people who care about our country and want to deliver our country to a better place. But on this issue, nearly our entire field is indistinguishable in practice from where Biden is on this, which is in an undefined, ill-defined way pouring more money into a war that I think is destined to become Vietnam or Iraq all over again. And if you don't learn from the lessons of the past, you're going to be making the same mistakes on an even larger scale going forward. We have to end this war. We can end this war and start prioritizing the interests of actual U.S. citizens here at home.
So I think, judging by the response you just got, I think a chunk of, I don't know what percentage, but a lot of Republican primary voters agree with you. Not all, but a lot. I don't think any Republican donors agree with you.
I think that's accurate. And I've lost, to be really honest with you, I've lost many large donors or prospective donors over this issue. And it puzzles me. Because I think the tempting thing to say is to have some conspiratorial explanation that they have money at stake in government contractors, Raytheon, or whatever. I don't think that's true, actually. I think there's something else going on in the psychology of an establishment in both the Republican Party and the Democrat Party that is reluctant to the idea that we somehow can't be the ones fighting the war that's the popular war of the day, the politically correct war. I think there's no such thing as a politically correct war. And so what I ask is, how are we actually going to end this conflict in a way that advances U.S. interests? And the thing that puzzles me, Tucker, is nobody in either party is talking about this right now. The Russia-China alliance is the single greatest threat that the U.S. actually faces today. And
that is actually an excellent point, because I do believe that China and Russia is their alliance is the greatest threat to our nation. I do believe that just sending a bunch of our young men, to fight that war will not truly fix that issue. We've learned that from Vietnam, like he said, in Iraq and all of these things. U.S. has always struggled, with this idea, do we practice isolationism, which we're not the big player on the international scale, or we move in and we start taking over and fighting those wars. I don't know necessarily what is the correct answer toward that, but what I do agree with him is that China and Russia are truly the single greatest threat to our country. What I believe is that America is wasting its time on unimportant issues like, catering to this LGBTQ plus, agenda, catering to climate change, people who are just have a bit, utopian concepts about the climate. I think you should care about the environment, but not to the proportion where you make a whole religion out of it. Okay, and try to tell average people that that's the most important thing that we're fighting here on in our world, when truly the greatest threat to our country is the alliance between China and Russia. Because China and Russia, they're not wasting their time trying to define what a man is or what a woman is. They're not trying to waste their time on these secondary, if unimportant issues that are self-evident and self-obvious.
Okay, well, since you're getting radical now, let's go through a list of all the other things you're not allowed to say. So you've just said, you know, you're not attacking anybody, but this doesn't seem to be helping us. In fact, it seems to be creating an alliance that we can't beat, and really, it's pretty scary. So let's just go through the list. Another thing you can't say is that maybe January 6th, while appalling on one level, maybe it was not an insurrection.
So let me talk about, I haven't talked about this much in the campaign. I'll be very honest with you. You want to know what caused January 6th? There's such a temptation to say that there's one man whose name is unspeakable. We can't.
No, first of all, it's QAnon. It's QAnon.
It's QAnon. You want to know what caused January 6th? Is pervasive censorship in this country in the lead up to January 6th. You tell people in this country they cannot speak, that is when they scream. You tell people they cannot scream, that is when they tear things down. And so the reality is, we were told that you could not question where the virus came from when we all knew it came from a lab in Wuhan, which now they admit. We were told that you could not send a private message to someone on the eve of an election that Hunter Biden's laptop story was actually a true story worth considering before an election. You were systematically suppressed. So think about this. You told you had to be locked down, had to take a vaccine that was mandated and forced down your throat, stay locked down in your home while Antifa and BLM roam and burn the streets of this country. So that's the lead up of one full year of telling people you have to shut up, sit down, and do as you're told. And then you tell them, okay, there's an election where you didn't get the information that you needed, such as the Hunter Biden laptop story being real and suppressed. That's what caused January 6th, is a cycle of censorship in this country. And until we look ourselves in the mirror and admit truth on that, we will not move forward as a country. And I think that's the real...
I so agree with that. You know, the whole thing with January 6th, what happened is the crazy censorship. Companies like YouTube restricting our freedom of speech, you know, and oh my goodness, guys, I can talk about this till I'm blue in the face. But the fact that we were locked down, the fact that we were forced to take a vaccine, that we couldn't speak our mind. But at the same time, we had Antifa and BLM movements, you know, breaking into things and doing crazy stuff. That was okay. I truly agree with him that that's what caused January 6th. You know, when you try to silence people and say you do not have a freedom of speech, you know, we're going to censor what you say, that is scary. That reminds me of communism, okay? That's what it reminds me of. And people will rise up. People will speak. And that's what happened. That's truly what happened. You know, we became so polarized and so divided that there was this whole agenda being forced down our throats. I remember, like, whenever I was just like, you know, working in healthcare and being forced to take a vaccine that I didn't want to take, but there was this whole pressure that if you don't, somehow, you know, you're less of American. The whole thing about masks, you know, and all of how they politicize that. But then now nobody's wearing a mask. Like, seriously.
A completely different world. It's not like you were mayor, state legislator. You're coming from business and technology and biotech. So what have you learned? Like, how have your views changed since you immersed yourself in crowds of voters and started listening to people?
Yeah, so I think my views have changed in part by my belief that we're not as divided as they make it out to be. Right? 'Cause many CEOs in this country are frightened, right? Of speaking their mind openly. It actually stops, many of them will say, well, stops them from being donors to me, to maybe other causes. They're deathly scared because they believe that we're a nation at our breaking point. And in some ways, we are, because we let it get there. But one of the things I've been convinced of, I've changed my mind on, is that I don't think we're nearly as divided as we're taught to believe. But I went to the south side of Chicago. It's one of the places it's not really where the political advisors would tell you to go if you're in a Republican primary. I went to Kensington and downtown in the inner city of Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. And I'll tell you, the people in those rooms, especially in the south side of Chicago, where they're converting South Shore High School into an encampment for migrants who they're spending $7,000 per person per month on. This is the supposedly far left, nearly entirely black, Democratic voting bloc. And I have never heard more eloquent cases for securing the border and actually prioritizing the interests of Americans than I heard in that room.
What did they say?
They said, what about us?
Yeah.
It was actually the right way to say that. And it came out in many ways where, look, we are Christians. We believe in treating these people humanely. But it's not right that they're spending $7,000 a month and getting baby formula when I couldn't find baby formula a year ago. I can't buy sneakers for my kids. They're providing sneakers for those kids. How does that work? How is that advancing my interest? And actually, you just reminded me of this. Many of them were asking me, as though I was on the side of it, of why on earth we're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. So it was interesting to me that the traditional partisan boundaries as drawn are really sort of retrofitted. We're sort of shoehorning an old structure. We're sort of shoehorning the modern truth into sort of an antiquated view where I don't think the dividing line in our country is between Republicans and Democrats right now. I think it is between those of us who are pro-American, who believe in the ideals of this country, who will not apologize for those ideals, who will stand up and sacrifice for those ideals, and those of us who are, and it exists in this country, I mean, the Vice President's a great embodiment of this, anti-American. Those who wish to apologize for a nation founded on our ideals. But if you divide it up that way, it is not 50-50 anymore. It's not even close. It's easily 80-20 in our favor, and half the 20 are people younger than me who never learned what those ideals were in the first place. We're going to bring them along too. And I think we have an opportunity to do in this country in 2024 what Ronald Reagan did in 1980. Deliver a landslide election, call the bluff on the division. Much of it is artificial. I fell for it. Right? Even when I started this campaign, I'm running for a Republican candidate for U.S. president, I don't even talk about Republicans that much anymore. I try not to use the word. Not because it's a bad word, but because it doesn't mean anything. Right? If half the Republican, 3/4 of the Republican Party's got the same policy as Biden on the most important policy matter of our time, and if much of the Democratic Party, or at least people on the south side of Chicago, believe in using the military on the southern border and putting the interests of Americans first, I'm not sure those labels are doing much for us.
He makes actually a really good point about securing the borders, guys. And honestly, just watching, the movie Sound of Freedom and what, these loose borders are doing and allowing more violence and more sex trafficking than ever, having loose borders does not help anyone. We need to treat people well, immigrants well, but we have to have a level of security. We just really do. So I totally agree with him in terms of that. And this whole idea, what he's saying, just kind of trying to unify people. I'm happy to hear him say these things, in terms of like trying to get us away from this bipartisan view. It's not Republicans versus Democrats, even if that looks like that on paper. We're fighting a much ideologue kind of election. What is it that we care about as a nation? It's not about the Republican versus Democrat issue anymore. It's just about what are the things that truly make us American.
Identity can be confining. Right? The left does this masterfully. You're black, therefore you can't achieve something. You're a woman, therefore you can't achieve something. Identity is confining. You can be imprisoned in the identities that you inherit. And I just want to be careful that we learn from the left, or learn including what not to do, to be confined and imprisoned by our own identity of what it means to be Republican. Let's just let that word go and instead ask the question of what it actually means to be an American today. That's the question of our time. And you ask people my age that question, you get like a deer in the headlights response. It's like, it's a blank stare initially. But on the other side of that is then an introspection to say, okay, there are certain ideals that we fought a revolution for in this country. Self-governance over aristocracy, sovereignty as a nation, free speech, meritocracy. That you get ahead in this country, not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and contributions. That's what it means to be an American. That's what we're running to. And honest to God, Tucker, I think that if we do this right, if we actually prioritize our vision, what we stand for, I think it's going to be a landslide election for I'm not going to say Republican candidate, a pro-American candidate in this race.
It's just interesting because what you didn't mention, so I asked you, you've been traveling around the country. It sounds like you've really, I mean, you went to Kensington on the South Side. You've really kind of been to the span of the country. I watch media coverage, and everything's about race. And America is divided by race. That's America's original sin. It's the thing that cleaves us as a country. You didn't mention that. So why do they keep telling me that?
They blow what I call woke smoke to deflect accountability for their own failure, actually. So what do you think affirmative action has done for black people in this country? Nothing. What do you think? It's been negative. It's created racism that otherwise would not have existed. I've seen it. I have hired black executives at companies I have founded on merit. I could care less for the skin color. And then behind closed doors, people say, well, that person got their job because of race, because they're jealous because they weren't good enough to get the job. But that is sad. It's unfair to everyone involved. They'll blow woke smoke. They'll say math is racist. When in fact, you know, what might be wrong is not teaching kids in the inner city for a year under COVID lockdowns how to do math. And then they're using this to cover up for that failure. I personally think that's actually what's going on in the U.S. military, too. Right? People wonder about where's this wokeness in the military coming from. I mean, our military has been disastrous in defining its purpose, how we're actually using the resources of a military to fight wars that we haven't actually shown great value from in the last 25 years. So let's just talk about systemic racism and white rage instead. It's a deflection mechanism. Companies do it. The military does it. Schools do it. Teachers' unions do it.
Oh, guys, this man's preaching truth here. I mean, seriously, like all of this wokeism, all of this systematic racism, all this affirmative action, all these things that they've been talking about have, you know, for years now, is to deflect from their failures, you know, to say, you know, rather than talking about the American value, the answer to everything is how we behave as individuals. It's on the merit of our character, our decision making, rather than on our skin color. You know, who cares whether you're white, black, or yellow? Who cares? What really truly defines what's really American is what you do, the hard work that you put into a vision, you know, how you treat people. Those are the true American values. But, you know, all this wokeism, like you said, this wokeism smoke is to sort of smear the picture, you know, to make us hate each other and start to group ourselves, you know, oh, I have this, you have this much privilege, I have this much privilege, this is how things been against me. So coerced. Those are ideologies that destroy this whole critical race theory that I'm so against, and destroying black communities, you know, making us hate each other based on this, you know, bringing actually racism back. Like, why are we doing that? You know, I'm so glad he mentioned that. And we see this also in companies embracing this wokeism and shoving down our throats, you know, like, I am so sick of this. I'm so glad that this man is speaking just straight up common sense, even.
Regardless of the color of your skin, how are we going to be a country that ensures opportunity, black, white, man, woman, doesn't matter? You know, my parents came to this country with almost no money. I've gone on to found multi-billion-dollar companies. And then people tell me, oh, that's because you had privilege. They tell me white privilege. It's sort of weird. It's sort of an interesting, it's kind of interesting.
Do you tell them?
I say, take the blindfold off, and now you have your answer. But the interesting answer is, actually what I do tell him, Tucker, is that I did have privilege. I didn't grow up in money, but I had two parents in the house, a mother and a father, with a focus on education and a faith in God. And you know what? That is the ultimate privilege. That if I'm going to enjoy that, every kid in this country ought to enjoy it too.
I just love that point that he's making, you know, this whole thing about privilege and this nonsense, you know, like same here, you know, guys, I'm half Ukrainian and half Mozambican. My parents immigrated here in 2007. We didn't have much money at all. We lived under housing projects, you know, and both of my parents went on and got education, you know. I went on, they instilled that value of hard work, not buying into this whole racism nonsense, you know, as being a black woman. We came here because we believe that America truly is a nation where you can have upward mobility if you work hard, if you study, if you Do your part, you can succeed. And that is the true American message, And I'm so thankful that in my life, there was always like the faith in God that with God's help, with hard work, we can achieve something. It's not because we're black or white or whatever else. And that is the message that's being under attack with this whole wokeism. I didn't have privilege. I wasn't white and I was fine. There's a bunch of white people who are poor and, don't have the money, the resources. How is it they're not up in the, in the top? We have poor white people, poor black people, poor, and we have rich people who are black or white. And so even the whole message of identity politics and critical race theory does not make sense at all. I don't know why we shove this nonsense onto people. And I'm so done with it, and I wanted to see it done, buried, and like forgotten. Okay, so anyway, guys, he's a really good candidate in terms of like what he's speaking for, the values that he is promoting. At this point, guys, anything is better than Biden. Anything's better than him. I think at this point we just all as a nation have this Biden fatigue, and we just want common sense people who promote truly American values. A lot of people, who don't believe in Christ as God, believe that Jesus was some kind of political activist, that he had some kind of, rebellion that he wanted to cause. When truly, what Jesus did was he brought his kingdom that is not made of stuff, a kingdom that is about changing and saving people, the hearts of people, saving the souls of people. And I think if anything, what America needs is the gospel, is to know that no matter what your skin, no matter what your color, no matter how much money you got in your bank account, if you come to the Lord Jesus Christ and you accept him as your personal savior, you can have a relationship with God that will absolutely transform your life, that will cure your depression, cure your anxiety, will give you a firm identity as a child of God, not just as a citizen of this great nation, but as a citizen of heaven that is beyond the here and now, a future that is secure with him. And I truly believe we, like never as Christians, have an opportunity to truly preach the gospel, which I believe at the end of the day is the ultimate answer on the individual level, not just on the social level, but also on the individual level. All right, guys, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video.